Hey everyone and welcome. This is the Commotion and I'm Roshan Joshi. Today we're going to be talking some cool stuff. We're going to hit some a little bit of science, a little bit of exploration, so stay tuned. If you like our content, make sure you hit that like button, and if you want to see more content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button or the bell for the notification so you are always up to date on anything that we're dropping. And we're going to get right into it. Today's going to be a little fun. We're going to talk about Elon Musk's plan for the human race to colonize Mars. So Elon Musk, as of a few years ago, has put together a plan. He is trying to sway the human race to become a space-ranked civilization, or a multi-planet species, a species or a race that is able to expand to multiple planets. So what's that mean? What that basically means is we are at a point where it might be beneficial for us to think about the future of us humans as a whole and find out if we have the availability to move to another planet alongside or coincide with the planet that we're already living on, so that we don't destroy the whole planet by taking all the resources, overpopulation, and slowly but surely bring an end to our own race. So Elon Musk is trying to put together this plan right now, and it is a very interesting one. I would say maybe like a while ago we would think it's something totally impossible, but not too long ago the human race, human beings, went over the oceans, the vast oceans, to go to the new world, which everybody thought was impossible. So there are things and leaps that human beings have made to strive, and this is just one more strive or leap that Elon Musk has viewed for the human race to be able to potentially take. So let's start off with why Mars. So Mars is... we'll start with why not Mars. So if you look at Venus is way too inhospitable. That's not a planet that we can even go to. If we look at the moon, one, not a planet. It's orbiting our own Earth. Two, the moon doesn't really have an atmosphere. So we wouldn't really be able to lock anything down by constructs of physics as well as we would like to. And that also, not having an atmosphere is not good for our internal organs. It's not good for us as human beings. Number two, it's not, or number three, it's not very rich in resources. So the resources that we would need to, even like basic chemistry, breaking down minerals and rocks, we would not be able to sustain that from the moon. Mars is a lot more resource rich. And this is a big one. The day on the moon takes about 28 Earth days. So one day to pass on the moon takes 28 days. Rather, if on Mars, it's about 24 and a half hours. So their day is about, half an hour off from our day, which would be wonderful. It's that coinciding. So nobody wants to live in a 28 day or 28 day sort of. So we can't live on Mars right now, though. Even if we want to, we would not be able to. But how would we be able to live on Mars? And that's kind of another thing we're going to be breaking down here. Number one is temperature. So it's way too cold for us there. We would have to heat up Mars. There are multiple ways to go about it, which I'll go in on another video. If you guys like this one, I can talk about how we could potentially heat up planets, which we do have the technology for right now. So if we heat up Mars, we're going to be able to have a thicker atmosphere, and we will be able to have liquid oceans. There's more than enough ice on Mars right now. It's just a matter of warming up the entire planet in and of itself. So warming up those polar caps to be able to turn that frozen solid water into liquid water. since Mars has a lot of trace elements that we need, we can actually grow plants once we compress the atmosphere. So there are a lot of alterations that we can do to the atmosphere. We can even put in a fake electromagnetic field in theory and in science if we really wanted to. So creating an atmosphere that's conducive for life, it's not exactly there yet, but luckily Earth and our people, we have the technology to be able to make it a more conducive atmosphere to live on. And fun fact is that 100 pounds on Earth is about like 38 pounds on Mars, so you have 62.5% less gravity. Pretty cool. You'd be able to super jump. You'd be able to pick things up that you would not be able to pick up normally. Not too bad. Sounds like fun to me. But not only is the atmosphere a constraint, or just actually physically being there a constraint, right now cost is also a constraint. So it's really expensive if we would ever want anybody to even travel out there right now. If a single person wanted to travel into space and go to Mars, it would cost about 10 billion with a B dollars a person. And that literally makes it impossible to have a self-sustaining civilization if nobody can get there. It makes no sense. So the plan is to bring the cost down. Well, that is Elon Musk's plan. So Elon Musk's plan is to bring the cost down, and what he is aiming for is a $200,000 median. I know that sounds crazy to everybody, but that is what he's aiming for. And if you really think about it, planes are like, you can get on a plane $60-$70, have a flight. So crazy things do tend to work out when you have a good strategy and a good plan. So he wants to bring it down to a $200,000 median, about the average price of a house in the US. And the plan is, if you want to save money, you can, and you're able to move to Mars. And once you get there, right away, you would not have a problem with having a job, because there would be labor shortages right in the beginning, because you're trying to create a civilization with buildings, with technology, with medical. So there's a lot of work to be done. And then also, if companies give sponsorships to people, they're able to relocate. To make any of this possible, they'd have to reduce that cost by 5 million%. So taking it from that $10 billion range and bringing it down to a $200,000 median would be about a 5 million% cost difference. So big differences there. And the whole entire plan is to be able to get there cost efficiently and be able to do it as many times as possible. So how could we even go to and from Mars cost efficiently? Well, there were 4 strong points that Musk was trying to make, or hit hard about, and that is fuel reusability, refilling in orbit, or full reusability, refilling in orbit, production of propellant on Mars, so having like a factory making propellant on Mars, and using the right type of propellant, using the right type of fuel. So going right into it, full reusability, which is very difficult but extremely essential to make things work. So I guess on a smaller scale, to explain it, if you have a plane, planes cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even very large sums of money. And if you were to only use a plane one time for one trip, the cost of taking a flight would be exponential. Nobody would be able to do it. But since you're able to use the same plane for multiple trips, so you have a plane that will go to China one day and then fly over to Fiji the next day, and then fly over to Thailand and Singapore, and is flying everywhere with passengers on, that allows that expensive piece of equipment to have a low cost of travel because it's being reused. Same idea would go for any type of spacecraft. It would be way more difficult for space travel if you would not be able to reuse these things. So essentially, the Earth and Mars are at the closest point every 2 years. So takeoff would be every 2 years. And going to reusability, there is, whenever you are flying any type of spacecraft into space, you have a booster underneath that propels the rocket forward into orbit, and once it hits orbit, the booster detaches and then usually like flies into the water somewhere. It goes back into the Earth's atmosphere and it flies into the water, and then that spacecraft would go off. For this plan, and to have that full reusability, what the essential plan is for the booster to take the spacecraft into space with all of its passengers, but no fuel. The spacecraft will stay in orbit, and that booster that took it into orbit will come back to Earth and come back to the landing pad, and they will put a tank of fuel, a tanker, on that same booster. So that's being reused. Now that booster is going to go back into space, meet back up with that spacecraft that they just brought over, and then fill up their tank with the tanker that they're bringing. And then that spacecraft is now able to journey into space and able to make that long trip to Mars. This is a really good idea, a really smart idea. If you did not do like an in-orbit refuel, it would be about a 500% increase on ticket cost, because you would not be able to fill up as many people in there, because the weight of the fuel would hold that spacecraft down, especially when you're trying to break orbit. So allowing yourself to fuel up in orbit means that you get to have more, you get to maximize your space with more people and more cargo and equipment that's going to be necessary to bring up there. So that is some real cool stuff within reusability, which brings us to refilling in orbit. So when you refill in orbit, it allows you to have like a much smaller spacecraft, and since you're filling with more weight in orbit, it creates like more. It's just more cost effective to be able to get out there, and to be able to have these return visits as well, because you're maximizing the amount of people that you can bring. The next piece was creating a propellant plant on Mars. So making fuel on Mars allows for reusability of ships, and enables people to be able to return back whenever they want to. So if we are not only making fuel on Earth, but we're also making fuel on Mars, we're going to be able to have a return trip. Those ships that are flying out to Mars, of course, as we said, for reusability, we're going to be using those same ships to come back. So if we can produce our fuel on both ends, that means that it's just much simpler for people to be able to come back. And also, it avoids having a space graveyard or spaceship graveyard just hanging out. Because instead of having every single ship do a one-time drop and then just end up staying there, we're able to come back. So right now, Mars actually does have like the proper chemical ingredients to create the propellant plant relatively easily. So that is also really good. And then I guess that brings us right into our fourth part, which is the right type of propellant, which the guys at SpaceX, I don't know too much about propellant, man, but the guys at SpaceX said that a full methane system would be the most efficient way for them to conduct this type of travel. So that's exactly what they would be producing, and that's also the chemical foundations of the propellant that they would be harvesting in Mars. So real cool stuff. So in total, I guess like as a little recap, the spacecraft is attached to a booster that sends it to orbit. The booster comes back to Earth, and they put a tank on that same booster. That booster flies back into orbit, fills up the spaceship, and that spaceship departs for Mars. The cool thing about that type of reusability as well is the way that they have sketched it out. They are estimating that they can reuse that same booster 1,000 times, which is a lot of trips. They can reuse a tanker the piece that's going to hold the fuel that they're going to bring back into orbit to fuel up with the ship, you can reuse that about 100 times. And the spacecraft in and of itself, the ones that are carrying the people and the cargo, that would be about 15 times, which that's a big drop off between being able to use something 1,000 times to 100 times to 15 times. So that reusability, yeah, they have it, but definitely would be great if they're able to use that more. But also safety is in the most important part. So, you know, if you do need more resources, it makes sense to not push things to its limit. Each ship would hold about 100 or more people, and it would also hold equipment and cargo. But ultimately what Musk's plan is to have about 200 people per ship. Also, they say that, like, to have a self-sustaining civilization, you need about 1 million people. Right off the bat, they're saying that they want to have about 1,000 ships ready in orbit. So they'll send up 1,000 ships, and then they'll fill them all up in orbit. And then during that 2-year span where Earth and Mars are at its closest, you shoot out all those ships. And then the whole Earth would basically be coming as a large fleet, which is very cool to think about. If any of you guys are like Star Trek people, I'm not, but if any of you guys are Star Trek people or Star Wars people and you can think of a massive space fleet, it's kind of what he's shooting for, so that you're able to at least have, like, you know, 10,000 to 100,000 people there already and kind of start creating. Also, it would take about 1 million people to make a self-sustaining civilization. So what's that mean if we're only sending like 10 to 100,000 people? It means that the timeline to be able to have about 1 million people or have a self-sustaining civilization would be about 40 to 100 years. And in retrospect, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that long, and that's not that much time. It's very, very, very small period of time within the human race timeline as a whole. So that is very important. But to be able to get these early trips out there, or you're not going to be able to because of the cost. So Elon Musk is actually opening up funding both privately and publicly, so that he's able to put that funding together to kind of get this kickstarted. And the main reason that Musk says that he's acquiring assets right now is so that he can put as much funding into the SpaceX program and into becoming a multi-planetary civilization as possible. So that's a big reason why he's acquiring assets, and also trying to get both private and public funding. So that essentially is Elon Musk's plan wrapped up in a little bit more layman's terms for the human race to be able to go to Mars. So very interesting stuff. I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. What do you think? What do you think about the idea of trying to expand ourselves currently? I know a lot of people are on the thought process of, if we can't fix what we have right now, why go and move forward? And I know a lot of other people are saying that we're a little bit too far gone to be fixed, but we can try our best right now, but we should still try to move forward. So a lot of different thought processes about it. I really want to hear what your thoughts are. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button. If you want to see more content like this, slam that subscribe button. And if you guys want me to make a timeline video of about approximately how long it would take for the first people to be shot out there and so on and so forth, definitely let me know. I would be more than happy to add that into this little bit of science. And looking forward to it, guys. Have a great one. Stay blessed, and I'll catch you all later.
Grinding my whole life. Stop that. Grinding my whole life. Stop that.